but neither here nor there. When there's no God that you can ultimately look to, it kind of tracks. It's like, well, you need to, whatever happened to you is horrible. There's no doubt about that. But you need, in order for you to overcome suffering and live a truly happy life, you do have to just get past that. Whereas, and you can do that, you can meditate, and you can sort of start to gain control of your mind. Whereas when you go to any faith, any tradition that has a God, there's always that thing of this always happens. Why did you let that happen to me? Why did you allow that? Where did that come from? Where does that fit in with your scheme?
That's where my anger stems.
And the thing is people have to go to that ultimate source that's not literally right there. It's just an abstract. And they have to, like, there's no answer. So they feel angry. They fuck you. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not being part of this. And they become your typical, like, bitter atheist or some, something of the like. Some people go to Buddhism and they actually let it all go and they live a happy life.
I think for me, my anger was what's the word? It was misdirected. It was
your anger was with those people and not
yes, exactly,
not with God.
Exactly. Well, in myself, because it was confusing. So I just I think in a sense I buried it, and they told myself that's not the case.
Yeah.
And yeah. So there was anger toward myself. Before that, there was anger toward God. So.
Yeah. You want to move on to
this is one of the most interesting things I've had the opportunity to.
Hey man, a lot of people you tell people you're going to start talking about God and they're like, "Oh God, put your Bible away, man. I don't want to hear about it." And it's like, look, I have my Bible with me just in case we need reference material. Considering we're doing this, our only established religious individual here is Alex, and he's a Christian, so I have the appropriate book. Actually, I'll leave this with you if there's any passages you can think of that might pertain to what we're talking about here. You might know a little bit better than myself.
I mean, admittedly, I'm not the best practitioner. There was a time when I knew so many verses, and I just haven't really dived into it in a long time. A lot of this I'm just kind of going off of memory that
hey, man.
Nobody's perfect. So.
Well, the point of these conversations is to show that like you can have these conversations with people. You and I differ drastically on many things that are of a very fundamental nature.
Yeah.
Like we could have an all day debate about abortion. And I actually think it would be about 5 minutes long at this point because we know each other's points so well that it's like, he believes, fuck it.
Yeah.
Fuck it. No, screw it. It's fine.
I was just thinking the other day about that, just like, okay, look, at the end of the day, neither of us are actually the policymakers that even have the authority to actually instill that, so it's like any sort of... It's not like they're going, you're killing the babies. Well, you're saving them, and we're not going to be friends. No.
I like how you characterize the other side. You're saving them, like you're angry about saving babies. So the next argument I had on here was the ontological argument, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Anselm of Canterbury, who ironically is a great theologian in history. However, this argument I don't really care for because it's semantic in nature. So for all of you out there, we're not really going to touch on that. I'm just touching on this to say that it's a crap argument in my opinion. But part of the definition of God is that God is a perfect being. It's an idea of the most perfect being out there. So part of perfection would be existence and the quality of existing. And so given that God is perfect and existence versus non-existence is within that definition, God necessarily exists. So I don't think that does much for anybody who's genuinely curious about these things, who's trying to find... I just don't think that argument is very... It doesn't hold a lot of weight. It's not a very weighty one. I don't care for it. So we're if there's anybody out there who's like, hey, I'm curious, like, go for it. Drop a comment or something like that. But we're just going to move right on to a very contentious point of the argument from morality. So God as the moral arbiter and the moral foundation or the foundation of objective morals. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, this one is more religious in terms of its foundation. Mm-hmm. I personally I don't believe in moral subjectivity. So like morals are moral and immoral just in the situation.
There's an objective good and evil.
There is an objective good and evil, and my measurement of that actually doesn't really. I don't think that the argument for morality is a very strong argument for God, because I think God being the source of morals themselves, it's not a source of morality. Like like it's kind of like water isn't wet. You know what I mean? I mean,
so even if God, like, say you had an a-religious society,
Okay.
they would hypothetically they would have their own system of morals.
Yeah.
The point about God being the source of morality is not saying that there aren't other like systems.
Yeah.
But that his would be the most righteous.
Okay, and see, I would agree with that, and for me, I think that's discoverable devoid of a divine being. Like I had this conversation with Dallas, good friend of mine, and it's so in human history we've kind of progressed upwards, and obviously we've made mistakes. Like slavery was one of those ones that America was one of the last civilizations to that's mine, sorry. America was one of the last civilizations to outlaw slavery. So in that front, we were kind of behind the curve.
Well, I mean, it still exists in some countries today. So
I'm fully aware of that. All woes of the world that we like to think are abolished still exist.
Yeah.
But in terms of like official within the country, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I think what we do is we progress upward through time. And we have this keen ability to actually take a look back at our history and go, see, that's where we screwed up. That's where we messed up. That's why we're not doing that same thing today that seems unrelated. So we have a very keen ability to look back with 20/20 vision. But history is like a brick wall. And I made this point last time. It's like a brick wall moving at 1 foot per year. Mm-hmm. You know, just unveiling little bits at a time. And so you can't really speculate as to what a more moral thing would be. So we take the example of I guess slavery is a good example. Slavery is a really good example of a completely immoral practice that we thought at the time, when we couldn't see ahead of the brick wall and we had slaves, we were like, oh, I don't know what the future looks like, so this is the way we do things. And then now we're here and we look back and it's like, slavery is abhorrent. That's a horrible practice. But we know that that when this brick wall moves 1,000 feet down the line, like in 1,000 years, our not ancestors, but predecessor? No, not predecessor. Our I forgot what the fucking word is. Those that come after us will look back on us and be like, those savages engaged in that practice, whatever it might be. Personally, I think it's going to be circumcision of both boys and girls. I think we're going to look back on circumcision of both boys and girls and go, those fucking barbarians did that?
Yeah.
Like, they did that to their young? That is cruel and unusual. Not the point. My point overall being that given that we have this keen ability to look back, there's an objective spectrum of an upward morality, like an upward moral trajectory. And I don't think that... Now, that might be God. That might actually be God's plan, is for us to discover morals like that. Because I think, regardless of whether you're Christian, Hindu, general pantheist, like whatever you are, I think that it's within that plan to just discover morality through the species time. But that's a very complex answer. It's not a simple answer to the question. So obviously, there's a better one out there. But The morality argument is an interesting one because that hinges on a whole discussion of free will too. Yeah, there's a whole and we both believe in free will. Yeah. There are some out there who don't believe in free will. Sam Harris is, in my mind, the foremost thinker on determinism and how we don't have free will. But he squares it, despite disagreeing with him vehemently. He squares it very well, which is why I respect him very much as a philosopher. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody else had any questions on morality, aside from, the classic, how could you let that kind of thing happen? We always square that with human free will. Mm-hmm. It's really the only answer.
Are we all, and honestly, I could probably answer this, but I don't think we are all given those avenues to understand morality. I think there's some that are born not having that.
Like a sociopath?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
yeah, most definitely.
And are those people...
They're screwed.
So yeah, you saying that
even God can't help it.
It's like a person being it's like a person being born in a part of the world that has no religion. Is that person damned because they were born on a different part of the world? So everybody, all the sociopaths are just inherently born.
All the people born in the Roman age before Jesus, done. Or you can ascribe to a Dantean perspective where they get a nice cushy circle of hell very far away from the fire. It's just a bit toasty, I think, is the worst hell they experience.
How would you explain that?
Well, it's the virtue. They were called the virtuous non-Christians in Dante's Inferno. Mm-hmm. And when he first ventures into hell, the first circle of hell, who did he meet? Who was his guide?
It was some poet.
It was a poet from Greek antiquity,
Virgil?
right? Was it? Oh, was he Roman? He was Roman, wasn't he? Okay, it was Virgil. It was Virgil. And the first circle of hell, when he meets Virgil, he's like, what is this place? It's not like desolate, but it's like, I just don't like it here. I just don't care for it.
It was just a lot of specters, and it was just very quiet, but a lot of them were just kind of talking. Some, there was like Socrates and a couple of other philosophers that were just like viciously arguing points just over and over again. And then you had some like Saladin, who was just kind of sitting on a bench, just kind of looking around. And it's the realm of hell reserved for the virtuous non-Christians, and it's just those who didn't have those who weren't they didn't have the good fortune to experience Christ's coming, but they were still decent people in God's eyes. So it's like, it's not your fault that you didn't believe in Christ, but in the same token, you didn't believe in Christ, kind of thing. It's a really interesting. I would actually advise that for really anybody. It's just a good recommended reading, regardless of your religious tradition. The video game was awesome.
Dante, it was. Crystal played that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she played through it.
I keep forgetting. I gotta bring over the animated version that I have.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a great story. He goes through the 33 circles of hell?
No, it was 7, I think, 7 or 8. Maybe.
No, it was that was the first bit. Like, he goes through. There's.
I had never read the book. I was going off of the video.
Oh, the video game.
The video game and the movie itself.
Oh, okay. Because
maybe 9 or 10.
I do know that in the writer's eyes, I forgot who was it Dante Alighieri?
Yeah.
Was that his name? Okay, yeah, because that was the character in the story as well. But when he descends into the furthest pit of hell, it's betrayers. It's betrayers that are chained and they're being tortured by Lucifer himself.
Well, it was well, at least in the movie, in the video game, it's actually a frozen hellscape. So as opposed to fire, like just in intense heat, it was intense cold. And so these people, like, there's like hands that are frozen, like sticking out of the ground as he's walking, and he'll step on them and like shatter the hands, and you'll hear someone scream, and he's like looking around, and there's just like someone's face just barely unfrozen out of there. And
the lowest circles. What I personally loved was that the lowest circles of hell were reserved to betrayers.
Yeah.
People who garnered the trust, that one metaphysical thing between humans that's like of utmost importance, and they shat on it. And those people get to be tortured by Lucifer himself for eternity. I just on a literary note, I thought it was a cool choice.
Yeah.
It's way better than those who exhibit like pride or any of the 7 deadly sins. Those were like some of the lighter circles of hell. Like those who were gluttons through life.
That was
they're chained to a table with a grand feast, and they're just chained there, and they have to look at all this delicious food that stays fresh.
I forget who it was.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they smell it and they look at it and they're like, oh my god.
I forget who it was in Greek mythology, but his punishment, he was in a creek that was up to his neck, so he was always here. And then there was a tree that was hanging apples just out of his reach, and so every time he'd reach for an apple to eat, it would move away, and every time he reached down to the water to drink, it would recede. And
Oh my
just
God.
like that for eternity.
Yeah, the Greek punishments are really good. Like Prometheus, I think it was to have buzzards pick out his insides.
His liver.
Yeah, it was his liver, and because the liver grows back.
Yeah.
They specifically would just peck out his liver and then go away, and it would grow back, and then he'd come back and they just pick out his liver for eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what he got for bringing light, reading, civilization, and culture to people, or not civilization, but light, reading, and culture to the people. Because Zeus was like, "Nah, fuck you, dude. Like, that was for us." But yeah,
freaking elitists,
right? I always like considering the early antiquity gods. You know, whether the polytheistic pantheons.
They're more relatable because of how corrupt they are.
Well, that's the thing. Is like it's like they made gods in their image.
Yeah.
They're like, this one is the utmost character of strength, but he also likes to fuck bitches and get drunk. Like just like me.
Dionysus in the house.
So the next one I had was argument from religious experience. And this one is one that I actually think holds the most, like, not the most weight, but it holds a lot of weight, because the experience of the divine it's an experience, therefore it's subjective. And while you can't track a subjective experience empirically, save for like fMRI and measuring different hormone levels or what have you in blood, how different synapses are acting in your brain and all that kind of stuff, you can't really track empirically a pure subjective experience. And so when somebody has a true experience of the divine, you really can't look away from that. You can't just completely naysay it. The one time we are able to naysay it is when drugs are involved. And I think that's both like a good and bad point. Like, anybody who's ever had a psychedelic experiences, we don't need to tell stories, but anybody who's ever had a psychedelic experience knows that there's something very, very real and very, very powerful and significant about that experience, regardless of the fact that it took substance to actually get you there.
Yeah.
And you can achieve it through breath work, though.
Oh, I've been there. I've just meditation alone, and it's one of the most profound experiences you can go through. It really is, and
you don't necessarily have to take a substance to reach that.
No, you don't.
We're given the tools.
Well, you got to think like the classic is psilocybin. Psilocybin goes right into a set of receptors in your brain. Like, it's not like your body's like, what the fuck is that? Ah! It's more of a matter of that actually fits right where certain serotonin molecules would go and certain serotonin receptors. So just the fact that those are there, and if they're stimulated a certain way, you can achieve this experience. And again, you can't track it, but when you have, like, let's say when you have one person that has a subjective experience and they have one experience, it's like, okay, whatever. But if you have one person that has an onslaught of experiences, there starts to be, it's like, okay, this guy has these regularly. But then you get to where there's a whole slew of people that have a whole slew of spiritual experiences or religious experiences or divine experiences. And at that point, you actually have to deal with it. Like, when it's just one guy, you can be like, oh, that's the town loony. Like, that's just the crazy guy in our neighborhood. Whereas when you have a whole group, you can't naysay an entire group that all have, a dozen or so or more experiences like that. So that's why I think it holds a lot of weight, is because, generally speaking, I like to think people are telling the truth most of the time. Like, when it comes to, what reason do you have to lie about, oh, I had a conversation with God, or, oh, I experienced the divine? Like, what reason do you have to lie about that? Save power.
Attention. Notice me.
Yeah, like, that kind of sucks.
Or to almost lie to yourself in a sense that you have the answers, or
that could be it.
Yeah.
That could
You're
very well
basically telling yourself and others that you've experienced this and that it's very real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you didn't experience it.
See, I like to think that a lot of the contemplatives, it's a very good term, I like Sam Harris's terminology here, but a lot of the contemplatives, Buddha, Jesus, the Dalai Lama in his various incarnations throughout the years, I like to think that they had such a real and profound experience like that they brought it to the people. Like, hey, there's something here. There's something. What I personally like about the Buddhist side is that right when people ask him about God, it's typically like, I don't know. I'm not touching that one. Not touching that one with a 10-foot stick. I know what goes on in here. I can help you with what goes on in here, but what made all this? Not gonna touch it, because the next thing I'm gonna have an angry Brahmin up my ass, and no, I'm not doing that. I personally like that religious experience kind of stems to the last argument on my list, and this is, I know this argument has been made, but for me this is the most significant argument, and it's the argument just from consciousness itself, and consciousness and your subjective experience, your subjectivity is far more special than it's given credit for. You have a lot of, there's what's called materialism, and you've heard materialism in the context of what that materialistic bitch just wants me to give her money or something like that, or that materialistic guy is just after houses and yachts and shit.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, whatever the next thing is to buy. But materialism as a philosophy is that everything we know is rooted in something, some material stuff, something.
Rabbit hole to hell.
It seems like, because, well, I mean, the view that consciousness arises from a brain. It's not that there's some separate consciousness, some separate thing that a brain then interacts with, or that brought about a brain with a bit of itself in the brain or something like that. It's, the brain at one point or another got so complex that it kind of, there's this output or this byproduct of consciousness. It's the computations within what's the word? It's the
medulla oblongata.
It is essentially that the system of information processing that happens in a brain got so expansive and so complex that it now has this byproduct that is subjectivity. And I think that's horseshit.